Welcome back to Timeless Steel Garage. Remember me? I know, I've been busy. I got parts piling up and time dwindling down, and it's been about a month and a half since I touched this girl, but it's time to get back at it. So let's go. All right, so you might remember the last video we left off with wiring. Now I had a new friend reach out, YouTube channel called Mystery Garage. Check him out, give him a subscribe. Awesome dude, does a lot of 2JZ work, a lot of 2JZ swaps. And he said, hey man, how come you're not using an electronic throttle body? You're running an automatic transmission, it'll work a lot better and it'll control your idle for you, and you won't need an idle valve. And I was like, well, I didn't have a good answer. And it turns out he had the extra parts laying around and hooked me up with them. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna change this upper intake out. This upper intake is for a GTE non-VVTi Supra. He sent me a VVTi upper intake and a VVTi electric throttle body. Now that VVTi electric throttle body is going to work better with the automatic transmission, and it's also going to act as an idle valve, so the car is just going to run better, especially when cold. And remember, that's my goal for this car, daily driver, not race car. So basically I got to take this upper intake off, and we're going to change throttle bodies and the upper intake. While we have this off, we're going to install a radium fuel rail, excuse me, and get the fuel injectors in. All right, so here's the throttle body I used to have on there, and this is your standard track style throttle body, and you can see the back of the casting. Okay, it has 1 TPS on it because I got rid of the track setup. And here's the throttle body that Mystery Garage sent me, and you can see it's got an electronic motor on it, basically the same shape, but this uses 2 TPS's. And you can see, because Toyota likes to do things like this, they changed the back of the casting so this won't bolt on a non-VVTi upper unless you make some kind of an adapter. All right, so if you look back at the wiring episode, I talked about the car having 2 different signals. The actual throttle body TPS and then an additional TPS that it bounces those signals off of. I thought that was a throttle body or a throttle pedal signal, but it turns out both of those signals are integrated in this electric throttle body. Essentially, there's a TPS on the motor side, and then there's an integrated TPS on the throttle spool side. And those 2 bounce positions off of each other to make sure they know where the throttle is. And what I learned is, if you bridge them together like I did in the wiring, some 50% of the guys say that'll work, the other 50% say that it'll cause timing issues, and this runs an internal self bit with the ECU and it'll fail. Now, if you look up on YouTube, there's guys that are running wired the way I have it right now. But because I want reliability, I don't want any issues with the ECU, I'm just going to put this electric throttle body on. And that's going to require changing to this, which is the VVTi upper. So pretty straightforward, and it's all OEM parts. Again, reliability. The other thing that we did differently is, you remember the eBay cast manifold or stainless manifold that I bought? So this is the standard eBay turbo manifold, right? And for the money, it's great, not bad. A lot of guys use it. It's split for a twin scroll style turbo, and I just don't like it. I want a log style. So I reached out, a guy built in the motor had bought this treadstone manifold, brand new. I saved a couple $100 on it, and this is cast stainless, and it's awesome. And for reliability, durability, toughness, quick spool, this is just the way to go. I'm going to probably make some changes here. I'm probably going to move this wastegate to the top of the turbo, but basically instead of the turbo being mounted up on the motor, it's going to tuck down on the motor. And this isn't a true twin scroll manifold, but you can see the way the design is, it kind of functions as both. So I'm going to lose a little efficiency on my turbo because my turbo is twin scroll, but I'm also going to pick up efficiency with the spool time on this manifold. So if I end up not liking it, I can always go to that eBay style one, but I really think for my goals and my horsepower goals, which 400 to 500, this thing's going to be awesome. It's not ever going to crack. I don't got to worry about it. Some of the supports on that eBay manifold are questionable, and I was going to have to modify that thing to make it work anyway. So those are the changes. We also got a new transmission pan, filter. We got the factory Asian oil, I got a Transgo shift kit, and I've got a custom shifter. This thing is amazing. If you don't know who Rad Designs is, check them out. But basically, I'm going to control this this transmission like a manual transmission and shift each gear independently. First through third will be mechanically, third to fourth is a button, and then I'll have a switch for lockout. So it's kind of an off-road style / drag racing style shifter, and I'm going to eliminate all the nonsense associated with the ECU controlling the transmission. Now, with the way that this is being set up with this electronic throttle body, I can actually wire that transmission so that when I put it in drive, it shifts like a normal automatic. So if we decide we don't like that and I want that function, I can always wire it in later. But for now, I'm going to just manually control the transmission. So it'll be like driving a stick without a clutch. And that's enough yabbering. Let's get to work. So here you can see I've got the upper intake off. For those of you wondering, this is a Rad Industries adapter. It's an awesome piece. Big fan. This is my original IS300 lower Rad Industries adapter, and as long as you're not worried about hood clearance, you've got plenty of hood clearance, you can put any GT upper on top of it. It's got O-ring seals, worked out pretty nice. I'm not using factory injectors, so I don't need the air assist anymore. So you'll notice I pulled the air assist pipe out of that intake. And here is my setup. This is a Radium Engineering fuel rail, and these are O-side Tiger injectors. Now, plenty of information out there about injectors. Basically, a GE uses side feed injectors. This now uses top feed injectors, or I don't know, I get confused. They're both two different injectors. So the beauty of these injectors is they're the right impedance and resistance for the factory ECU, and they're about 100 cc's larger. These are 440 cc injectors, which will be pretty much capable of what my horsepower goals are. So if I decide I want to push more power later, one, I'm going to need to go to a standalone ECU, and two, I'm going to have to change these injectors. But the beauty of this Radium fuel rail is that it's all AN fittings, and you can change the injectors to pretty much whatever you want. It comes with aftermarket adapters to put in here if you're using different injectors, so good to go. All right, there you have it. Fuel rail's installed. Now there's a 6AN plug here and here that I have to buy, and I have to buy the fittings for the end of the rail, so I'll tape those up. But really straightforward. If you haven't installed injectors before, make sure you read the instructions. But lube up your O-rings and your seals. Make sure you don't pinch them when you install them. The O-side Tiger injectors come with adapter harnesses. This is the way I chose to route them. I brought the wiring up from the bottom, and you know, make sure you use a torque wrench and don't over tighten the bolts on the intake itself. But other than that, you just got to make sure that if you pull up and down on your injectors, that they stay seated inside the rail and the intake, and they don't come out and have a chance of leaking. This GE rail uses the stock IS300 bolts and plastic spacers. All right, I went ahead and taped up the fuel rail so that I remember to put plugs in it, and which I think I should be able to do without having to take the rail out, hopefully. So now I'm going to take the new VVTi upper intake from the Supra that I got from Mystery Garage and put that on reverse, same as taking it off. Pretty easy. That's just why I like this Rad adapter. Once you get it bolted to that lower intake, like, super simple process to remove the upper intake. There it is, that simple. So now we have a GE non-turbo IS300 lower Rad Industries adapter, Supra VVTi GTE upper intake manifold. Now we're going to put the electric VVTi throttle body on. I'm going to put all the sensors on that it came with just because they block the holes in the manifold. I'm not using most of them. All right, so we've got the VVTi upper. I put all the factory sensors on. You got your vacuum boost reference, your map sensor, and then one of them is an evap sensor. Through the TPS on the other side here, it's just on there. I haven't set it, that's plugged in. So I'll have to verify that I have that TPS wired correctly. And then I'm going to have to also add a TPS wiring. Those wires that I bridged in the ECU when I said I deleted the pedal sensor, that's this. So that has to, instead of bridging the TPS and the ECU, I'll cut that, run wires to this. So basically you essentially have 2 TPSs wired, and then you've got to provide powers and grounds and a signal to the ECU right here to power the ETSI motor. So that's done. And then if you look, the studs on the exhaust manifolds, they have to be cut for pretty much all aftermarket manifolds. The outside ones don't, but basically they all have this little star pattern extension at the end to be able to back them out of the head. If you just cut those off, that makes clearance. So, and then a pro tip, always thread nuts on a stud when you're trimming it, so then when you back the nut off, it just taps it right there for you. And I don't have copper nuts for this, but they'll work for now. So I'm just testing fitment here. And then obviously there's going to be a gasket behind it that pushes it out just a little bit. So it looks like I'll get away with just trimming the ends off the studs. So these are just junk eBay gaskets that came with that eBay manifold. And you guessed it, I'm gonna use them. Probably end up regretting that decision and have to change them after a month, but for now, they're gonna work. So I'm just gonna make sure that they fit. Perfecto. So I'm gonna take the tape off of this thing, get those off, and put that manifold on. All right, so the first install of the manifold was a fail. So these very bottom 2 studs, you gotta take an additional like 1/8 inch off of them past the little socket extension because they hit the bottom of the treadstone manifold. Well, here you can see you take these nuts off after you've cut it, and your nut turns into a tap and die and cleans the threads up for you. I mean, I also have extra nuts, so there's that. Boom. Check it out. That's why I wanted that treadstone manifold. I mean, look at that, dude. Looks factory. Thing's bulletproof. It's heavy. You know, daily driver material as far as I'm concerned. So it's on there, and I think I'm going to go ahead and throw the wastegate on, and then I'm going to throw the turbo on. But I'm not sure if my wastegate fits that size adapter that this came with, so I got to double check. All right, there it is. It's going to look pretty sexy when it's done. Couple of things I don't like. So this BSI wastegate's just sitting on here, and this is a Treadstone 44mm adapter. And I don't know if this is the hardware this came with or just the guy that I got it from had on there, but the hardware, the studs are too long, the washer stack's too thick, so when you tighten that adapter down, you can't even get the band clamp on there. And I just don't like it. So I'm gonna probably weld this adapter to the manifold and get rid of the hardware and the studs altogether. I might even just weld a blanking plate on this, drill a hole in the manifold, and weld the wastegate here because it'll be more efficient. But either way, manifold's got to come back off so that I can weld the wastegate flange on there. But I had to mount that snail on there just to get motivated. Okay, so I don't have any TIG gas right now, so I'm going to remove these stock radiator supports that also support the sway bar. They are spot welded to the front beam and welded to the sway bar. And I have drop brackets that are going to tuck the intercooler in here and then allow the radiator to sit in its normal spot. Now, as far as radiators and intercoolers, this is what we got. Mission motor radiator, which I could care less about buying a mission motor radiator, but it fit the dimensions I needed perfectly. And I got a universal aluminum radiator from Summit that is just a little bit shorter than the Mercedes radiator, but the same width, and it has integrated transcooler ports. So that's gonna end up working out great. And then I got drop brackets from a company called Diesel Pump UK. Yes, Diesel Pump UK. These are awesome. Stainless drop brackets. They're all bolt-on. They've got slides for the intercooler so you can adjust it and move it. And then they've got a clamp system for the sway bar and a clamp system for that front beam. And I'll show you how they work. Literally just, once those are cut off, that'll slide right over that beam. So, pretty easy. There's pieces of the bumper and the core supports. And there's your general idea. You can see the intercooler now from underneath behind the bumper. And I just set it in there so you guys can see. That's generally how it's going to sit on those brackets, and then the radiator will sit behind it, and you really won't even see the intercooler from inside the engine bay. It's a small intercooler, but for my power goals it'll be fine. There's your general idea. I got to do some clearancing to get them to sit on the sway bar properly, and then there'll be a hole drilled through that front core support of that front main beam to lock the brackets in. Well, there you can see that the intercooler just barely hangs down. In fact, when the car's driving, unless you're way out in front of it, you're not going to be able to see it. But you can see it just tucks right there. And if you look at it from the top, you can see that the radiator is just going to go right behind it, like it's never been there. I'll have to cut this little guy out over here to make a 90-degree pipe on each side. They'll come out behind the sway bar and then come back in, up, and then come back in over here and up. So I got the radiator and intercooler just set in there, mocked up, and you can see everything tucks in nice, and you can't even tell there's an intercooler in front of it when you look in the engine bay. So that's gonna work out good. It's mocked up. I'll take it all apart now and permanently install those sway bar mounts. All right, so got rid of this bracket over here. Obviously I'll clean that up a little bit better. There was an old bracket hanging here, and there was an old bracket hanging here. I think there was like a plastic underbody shield or something with the radiator when the car was stock. I don't know, it's been missing for a long time. But we've cleaned it up under here quite a bit. And so once I clearance this a little bit, get these clamps sitting level, put the braces underneath to secure to the sway bar, verify that all that fits, I'll take it all back out, paint all the bare metal, make sure it's not gonna rust. There's a little bit of surface rust, I need to paint that. So, good news is we've confirmed that this is gonna work. The intercooler I got test fits good, the radiator test fits good. Got the turbo mocked up and the wastegate mocked up. So I gotta make some changes to that manifold. I already clocked the turbo, so I've got that pretty much set so that I can drop it back in and get the drain lines and the pressure lines going. So we got a lot of good stuff done today. Upper intercooler, throttle body mounted, fuel rails mounted, TPS installed. So I think I'm gonna call it quits for now and get the shop cleaned up. And there's some parts I need. I gotta get some TIG gas. And I think the next thing is to get that transmission straight. Stay tuned.